There are two kinds of quiet daughters in every house. The ones whose silence is obedience, and the ones whose silence is memory. Most parents never learn to tell the difference until the morning a folder slides across the kitchen table and their daughter finally lifts her eyes. My name is Quinn Everett. I had just turned 18, and at 9:03 the next morning, my mother slid a thick manila folder across our kitchen table like it was nothing more than breakfast. She gave me her sweetest smile and said softly, "Honey, now that you're officially an adult, we need to talk about that money Grandpa left you." My blood ran cold. She had no idea I already knew exactly what she was planning. Before I take you into that tense morning in our kitchen, please hit the like button and subscribe if this is your first time here. It helps this channel more than you know. Drop your city and the current time in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. Let me take you back 6 months earlier, to a quiet Tuesday evening in October, when I first discovered what kind of daughter I really was. The sky was already dark by 5 o'clock. I was cleaning my bedroom when I found Grandpa Harold's old cedar box sitting on the top shelf. He had given it to me on my 17th birthday, the last gift he ever handed me himself. The hinges whispered as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a pressed maple leaf from his backyard, a faded photo of him and Grandma Margaret on their anniversary, and a sealed white envelope with my name written in his strong, careful handwriting. "Quinn, open only if something feels off with your mother before your 18th birthday. Call David Caldwell immediately." I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed, holding the envelope. Grandpa had passed away almost 2 years earlier from a heart attack. He had always been my safe person, the one who let me feel things without judgment. I stared at his handwriting until my eyes blurred. He had known. Somehow he had known enough to leave me this secret warning. Downstairs, I heard the soft rustle of papers being shuffled and folded. My mother's voice low and controlled. Mark's voice even lower. I didn't need to hear the words. I slipped the envelope back into the box, closed it gently, and went downstairs for a glass of water. The kitchen light was still on at 10:30 p.m., even though Mom was supposed to be in bed. I said nothing. That envelope was the first real protection anyone had ever given me. I just didn't fully understand it yet. My dad, Gregory Everett, died when I was 10. He drove a silver Ford Ranger and never came home from a delivery run one foggy November morning in 2018. Black ice, a semi-truck, and a state trooper at our front door. Mom cried for exactly 1 week. Then she started house hunting for a bigger place with a new kitchen. She remarried Mark Hollis in 2020, a loud, confident contractor with a big truck and an even bigger laugh. He brought his daughter Skylar, 2 years younger than me, who moved into the bedroom across the hall. I learned 3 painful truths very quickly in that house. First, my mother punished tears. If I cried, she would sigh heavily and say, "Quinn, stop being so dramatic." Then she'd take her wine glass out to the porch. Second, she punished real joy. If I laughed too loudly, she'd narrow her eyes and say, "Inside voice, Quinn. You don't need to show off for everyone." The only safe way to exist was to stay completely flat. No big feelings. So by the time I was 12, I had learned to go quiet. I stopped showing real emotions around her. I saved them for books, for Grandma Margaret's porch before cancer took her, and for quiet afternoons helping Grandpa in his tomato garden. Mom thought my silence meant obedience. She was wrong. My silence meant I was watching. My silence meant I was remembering every single thing. In our house, emotions were currency, and I had stopped spending mine a long time ago. 8 years later, she would slide that folder across the table and finally understand exactly how much I had been paying attention. 10:26 a.m., April 19th, 2026 business. Dinner at our house always ran like clockwork. At 6:30 sharp, Mark would stomp in through the garage, kick off his dusty work boots, and drop his heavy keys on the counter with a loud clatter. The smell of sawdust, sweat, and truck leather followed him everywhere. He'd immediately start complaining about his day, bad clients, crooked permit officers, or subcontractors who bailed last minute. Mom would already have his glass of red wine poured and waiting. Skylar would chatter nonstop about school, boys, or whatever drama was happening with her friends. I usually stayed quiet, just listening. That Sunday evening in March, the mood was different. Skylar burst into the dining room waving her phone. I got in. Early decision to Bucknell. $65,000 a year before books. Mark raised his glass high. That's my girl. We'll make it work. Mom reached over and gently touched Skylar's wrist, her voice warm and reassuring. Don't worry about the money, sweetheart. We'll figure it out together as a family. Skylar glanced at me across the table. I was carefully cutting my grilled chicken into small pieces. Without looking up, I said in a calm, even voice, I received my acceptance to Penn State main campus yesterday. The room went completely silent for a few seconds. Mom gave me her charity smile. That's nice, Quinn. Mark took a long sip of wine and grunted. College is mostly a scam these days. Real money is in the trades. But do whatever you want. Mom added quickly, we'll sit down and talk properly about your future closer to your birthday, honey. There it was again. That phrase she had been repeating for weeks. Closer to your birthday. It didn't sound like a celebration. It sounded like a trap was being set. Mark leaned back in his chair and said casually, almost too casually, family money should stay in family hands, Quinn. Not trapped in some lawyer's office collecting dust. Mom shot him a fast warning look that said, shut up. I kept my face completely neutral and continued eating. Inside, my mind was racing. I was paying close attention to every word, every glance, every tiny shift in their voices. My grandma Margaret had passed away from breast cancer when I was 14. She fought hard twice. The second time it came back stronger. On her last afternoon, she held my hand tightly and whispered, you are such a good girl, Quinn. Mark took a long sip of wine and grunted. College is mostly a scam these days. Real money is in the trades. But do whatever you want. Mom added quickly, we'll sit down and talk properly about your future closer to your birthday, honey. There it was again. That phrase she had been repeating for weeks. Closer to your birthday. It didn't sound like a celebration. It sounded like a trap was being set. Mark leaned back in his chair and said casually, almost too casually, family money should stay in family hands, Quinn. Not trapped in some lawyer's office collecting dust. Mom shot him a fast warning look that said, shut up. I kept my face completely neutral and continued eating. Inside, my mind was racing. I was paying close attention to every word, every glance, every tiny shift in their voices. My grandma Margaret had passed away from breast cancer when I was 14. She fought hard twice. The second time it came back stronger. On her last afternoon, she held my hand tightly and whispered, you are such a good girl, Quinn. Never let anyone make you feel otherwise. I didn't cry in the hospital room. I saved my tears for the parking lot, sitting in Grandpa's old Buick while he just let me sob. He never told me to stop. He just said, let it all out, Peanut. Grandpa Harold lasted 2 more years after her. He grew quieter, friendlier. The summer I turned 16, I stayed with him for 2 months, reading to him by the window, watering his tomato plants and cooking his eggs exactly the way he liked them, hard yolks, extra butter, heavy salt. He died peacefully in September at 78. Heart failure. At the funeral, Mom wore a perfect navy dress and cried at exactly the right moments. Mark stood in the back checking his phone. 2 weeks later, the will was read. There was a trust in my name, roughly $680,000 in blue-chip stocks, cash, and proceeds from a small property Grandpa had sold years ago. I couldn't touch the principal until I turned 18. On that exact day, full control would transfer to me. The trustee listed was David Caldwell, Grandpa's longtime attorney. On the note inside the folder, Grandpa had written 6 simple words. Your choice, your life. Love, Grandpa. Mom had read those words with a look I'll never forget. Not grief, not pride, but cold calculation. Grandpa had left me a door. Mom was already looking for a way to lock it. 6 months before my 18th birthday, a man in a sleek gray suit started visiting our house every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Same charcoal Lexus in the driveway, same expensive leather binder under his arm. Mom's story about him kept changing. First an insurance advisor, then a financial planner, then just a friend of Mark's. But the binder never changed. One cold afternoon in January, I came home early from the library because of an incoming snowstorm. The moment I stepped into the mudroom, I heard their voices from the kitchen. Mom said clearly, "Once she signs, the rest is just paperwork." Mark replied, "And if she hesitates?" Mom let out a short, dry laugh. "Quinn?
She'll sign."
She always does what she's told." I stood frozen in the mudroom, boots still on, heart hammering in my ears. Then I slammed the door loudly and called out, "Mom, I'm home early." I heard papers being swept away quickly. When I walked into the kitchen, the table was spotless. Mom turned with a perfect smile. "Snow day already? Want some hot cocoa, sweetheart?" I smiled back weakly. "Sure." Under her purse on the counter, I spotted the corner of a cream-colored folder with embossed lettering, "Briggs and Associates, Family Wealth Planning." Skylar walked in right behind me and asked innocently, "Is that about Quinn's money?" Mark snapped immediately, "Skylar, go upstairs." That night, after everyone went to bed, I finally opened Grandpa's envelope in secret at Willow Creek Park. The swings were empty. The sky was heavy and gray. I sat on a freezing bench and read his letter with shaking hands. "Peanut, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong with your mother. I suspected it for years. David Caldwell has been my attorney for 30 years. He's expecting your call. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to choose your own life. I believe in you. Love, Grandpa." Below was David Caldwell's phone number. The next day I called him. His warm, steady voice on the line felt like the first safe thing I'd heard in years. He asked me to come to his office in Lancaster the following week under the excuse of a college aid meeting. Mr. Caldwell's office smelled of old books and polished wood. He was in his mid-60s, kind eyes, white hair, and a suit that looked decades old. He explained everything slowly and clearly. "At midnight on your 18th birthday, the money becomes fully yours. You can create a new irrevocable trust with a professional corporate trustee. Your mother, Mark, and Skylar will be permanently excluded." I listened carefully, then asked, "What do you recommend?" He suggested naming it the Margaret Trust after my grandmother. "We built it strong. Spendthrift clauses, no access for anyone else, distributions only for education, housing, and medical needs. Irrevocable. Once signed, even I couldn't undo it." He also showed me the draft documents from Lance Briggs, Mom's attorney. It was a trap designed to give Mom control over my inheritance while I was still technically a minor. They had been planning this for 4 months. On the drive home, I kept my face calm, but inside I was steeling myself. When I walked in, Mom was cooking my favorite chicken pot pie. She smiled warmly. "How was the college meeting?" I smiled back. "It went really well." I ate the pot pie that tasted like my childhood while knowing I was about to betray the only version of me she had ever known. The Sunday before my birthday, Mom made her famous pot roast, the big something important is coming meal. Candles were lit. Skylar actually put her phone away. Over dinner, I asked innocently, "Mom, what's the real difference between a trust and just a family account?" Her eyes lit up. She leaned forward like a teacher. "Trusts are complicated and dangerous, honey. Lawyers take huge fees, things get delayed, and sometimes the money just disappears. Family accounts are better. Everything stays together with people who actually care." Mark nodded aggressively. "Family money belongs in family hands, not with some cold corporate trustee in Harrisburg who doesn't know us." The word corporate slipped out. I had never mentioned it. They knew more than they were pretending. Skylar, staring at her plate, suddenly said, "Mom already told me the money was supposed to be for all of us anyway." The table went dead silent. Mom's fork froze midair. Mark quickly snapped, "Skylar, eat your food." I kept my voice soft and confused. I thought it was just Grandpa's gift to me. Mom recovered fast with her sweetest tone. "We're a team, sweetheart." That's all she meant. I smiled and passed the gravy. Inside, I felt both rage and deep sadness. They had been planning to take what Grandpa left me for months, and they had even pulled Skylar into it. 2 days before my birthday, Mom announced an early celebration dinner at Willow Creek Country Club. I never agreed to it, but 15 people showed up anyway, the pastor, Mark's business partner, neighbors, and her church friends. Skylar wore a new pink dress. Mark wore a tight navy blazer. During dessert, Mom stood up and tapped her wine glass. I want to toast my beautiful daughter, who's about to make such smart decisions tomorrow on her 18th birthday. Everyone raised their glasses. I smiled politely and said thank you, but my eyes caught a man sitting alone 3 tables away, mid-50s, thinning hair, expensive watch, leather briefcase. He gave Mark a small nod. Lance Briggs. He was already there, waiting for his payment. The night of my birthday, April 15th, 2026, I locked my bedroom door at 11:30 p.m. My laptop was open. At exactly 11:52, Mr. Caldwell joined the Zoom call, along with Priya Desai from Midland Trust Services and the online notary. At 11:59, Mr. Caldwell asked gently, "Are you ready, Quinn?" I took a deep breath. Yes. At exactly 12 hours and 1 second, I typed my full name, Quinn Marie Everett, slowly, deliberately. The notary confirmed. Priya confirmed the transfer. At 12:04 a.m., she said the words I'll never forget. Confirmed. $681,412.90 has been received. The Margaret Trust is now fully funded and irrevocable. Mr. Caldwell smiled into the camera. Happy birthday, Quinn. The money is safe. It's yours. I finally exhaled. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I slept deeply that night. The next morning at 7:45, I went downstairs wearing my favorite soft cream cardigan and Grandma's gold earrings. The kitchen smelled of pancakes and bacon. 3 unlit birthday candles stood on my plate. The manila folder sat right next to my coffee mug. Mom turned from the stove beaming. There's my birthday girl. Happy 18th, sweetheart. She hugged me tightly. Too tightly. Then she sat down, folded her hands, and used her warmest voice. Honey, now that you're 18, let's talk about Grandpa's money and get some family paperwork signed. She slid the folder across the table. I opened the folder slowly, reading every single page with deliberate care. Mom's smile started to crack after 2 minutes. By the 5th minute, Mark was tapping his foot impatiently. Quinn, you don't need to read every word, he said, his voice losing its warmth. I like to understand what I'm signing, I replied calmly. On page 5, I pointed to a line. This says a big portion of the money goes to Hollis Everett Holdings, LLC. What is that exactly? Mom blinked rapidly. It's just a family company for taxes, sweetheart. Nothing complicated. Mark leaned forward. Just sign the flagged pages, so we can enjoy your birthday. I looked straight at him. Mark, how long have you and Mom been working with Lance Briggs? The name hit like a slap. Mom's face went pale. Mark's jaw tightened. Mom spoke too quickly. We haven't even mentioned his name yet.
How do you know that?
I turned to the last page and showed them the footer. This document was created 4 months ago, while I was still 17, while I was still a minor. The kitchen became deathly quiet. I continued, my voice steady, but filled with years of buried pain. You plan to have me sign this before midnight on my 18th birthday so you could control Grandpa's money. You were going to use it for Skylar's Bucknell tuition, for Mark's business debts, and for whatever else you wanted. All while calling me your good quiet girl. Mom's eyes filled with tears. After everything I sacrificed for you. I cut her off gently but firmly. Sacrifice? You mean crying for 1 week after Dad died, and then hunting for a bigger house? Or marrying Mark and letting him and Skylar treat me like an outsider in my own home? I was never allowed to cry. Never allowed to be happy too loudly. I had to be quiet so you could use me. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated on the table. 9:03 a.m. The screen showed David Caldwell, Esquire. I answered and put it on speaker. Good morning, Quinn. Happy birthday. Mr. Caldwell's calm, professional voice filled the kitchen. I'm calling to confirm that at 12:04 a.m. this morning, the full amount of $681,412.90 was successfully transferred into the Margaret Trust. It is now irrevocable. Your mother, Mark Hollis, and Skylar Hollis are permanently excluded as beneficiaries or trustees. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Mark turned red, veins bulging in his neck. Mr. Caldwell continued, "The document you're holding is no longer enforceable. Any attempt to divert a minor's inheritance for personal gain is a serious fiduciary breach. I have already filed a complaint against Lance Briggs with the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board." Tears streamed down Mom's face. "Quinn, please. We're family." I looked at her, my voice cracking with emotion for the first time. "You never treated me like family. You treated me like an ATM that needed to stay quiet. Grandpa gave me a choice. I chose myself." I stood up, picked up the folder, and walked to the door. Aunt Beth was waiting in the driveway just as Mr. Caldwell had arranged. As I stepped outside into the bright April sunlight, I turned back one last time. "Skylar, this wasn't your fault. Text me when you're ready to be free too." I closed the door behind me. Months later, Mark's business collapsed under its debts. Mom filed for separation. Briggs was suspended from practicing law. Skylar ended up at a much cheaper state campus. I started at Penn State, made real friends, and finally learned what peace felt like. I still visit Grandpa's grave sometimes. I sit there and whisper, "I chose my life, just like you told me to." Thank you for watching my story. If it moved you, please like, subscribe, and share. The next video is already in the works. You deserve to choose your own life too.